Hello all. X-Men, The Ties That Bind. Part 1. In the early 1960s, superheroes were beginning to recover from the collapse of the costume super do-gooders that nearly wiped out those characters a decade earlier. The reason for the decline of superheroes was complex, but by the mid-1950s, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were virtually the only remainders of DC's pantheon. In an effort to rejuvenate the field, DC Comics began to retool versions of their earlier characters. Editor Julius Schwartz offered readers a new and improved Flash in 1956, and this first appearance of the new Flash is generally hailed as the beginning of the Silver Age of comics. The Silver Age were heroes where the literary heirs of the Golden Age characters of Depression and War years. The Flash tryout in Showcase number 4 generated a sufficient enthusiasm to give the Scarlet Speedster his own book. A revamped Green Lantern followed in 1959. The following year, DC brought out a team book, The Justice League of America. Inspired by a similar Golden Age team, the Justice League was a surefire hit, bringing together the heavy hitters like Flash, Green Lantern, with characters of lesser popularity like Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, on occasion Superman and Batman also showed up. With so many characters between the same covers, Justice League had something for every superhero fan. The book sold very well. The success of Justice League sparked interest in the offices of Marvel Comics. In its earlier incarnation as Timely Comics, Marvel had once been a contender in the superhero field, with Golden Age greats like Captain America, the Human Torch, and the Submariner. Half-hearted efforts to revive some of these characters in the 1950s had fizzled, and Marvel was reduced to publishing monster and mystery comic books for younger readers. The superhero renaissance at DC prompted Marvel publisher Martin Goodman to get into the act. Goodman asked longtime comic writer Stan Lee to come up with a superhero team. Disenchanted with Marvel's juvenile niche in the market, Lee decided to create the kind of characters he personally wanted to read about. With artist Jack Kirby, who had been in the field even longer than Lee, the writer scripted the first issue of the Fantastic Four. In the early days of the book, Lee's writing was somewhat tentative, and Kirby's art scarcely hinted at the dazzling creativity he would later unleash. Yet from the very beginning, the Fantastic Four established itself as a comic book determined to break the rules and conventions of the genre. The Fantastic Four were superheroes as no one had ever seen. Four friends, former colleagues who had gained their superpowers as astronauts exposed to mysterious cosmic rays, who had divided their time between fighting cosmic menaces and squabbling with each other. The four are Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, who bursts into flame; his sister, Susan, the Invisible Girl, who disappears; Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, whose elastic limbs stretch unbelievably, and the gruff pilot, Ben Grimm, the ever-loving, blue-eyed thing, who turns into a monstrous figure of tremendous strength. Here were characters with unidentifiably distinct personalities and the patterns of speech before their origins. Most superheroes had interchangeable personalities, powers, and costumes differed, but practically everyone talked alike, thought alike, and acted uniformly, kind of altruistic. Aside from the sheer nobility, the older superhero characters lacked convincing motivation for their good deeds. The despaired and rough-edged champions, the Fantastic Four, departed radically from the earlier cardboard heroes. Each member of the foursome was a unique character whose words and actions sprang convincingly from their respective personalities. For example, the Thing was chronically angry because he loathed his misshapen appearance, and Reed was overbearing because he was uneasy with his own leadership. By the standards of that time, these characters were deep, rich, and refreshing, complex in motivation. To further skew the patterns, these heroes groused, bickered, and argued among themselves. This was definitely not how good guys behaved. An argument between the Flash and Green Lantern? Out of the question. A tiff between Superman and Batman? Unheard of. A meeting of the Justice League degrading into a brawl? Not before Lee and Kirby's Revolution, although later others began to imitate their successful superhero style. The Fantastic Four came along before the Until the Fantastic Four came along, superheroes were, with few exceptions, attractive, polite, and, well, heroic. Ben Grimm, a.k.a. the Thing, was none of those. Reminiscing about the qualities that set Marvel's team apart, Stan Lee writes, suffice it to say that the ever-loving is bad-tempered. The ever-loving Thing is bad-tempered, ill-mannered, crude, and not the most attractive guy you're apt to meet. Therefore, what could be more natural than that he would turn out to be the Fantastic Four's most popular and beloved member? Other eccentricities set the Fantastic Four apart. Instead of the typical romance, endlessly frustrated by misunderstandings and secret identities, Susan Storm and Reed Richards were already engaged when the series began. As for secret identities, the Fantastic Four again broke the mold. From the beginning, their identities were known to the world. When Reed and Sue married in the Fantastic Four Annual number 3, the book plowed new ground. Superhero marriages are not uncommon today. Even the primarial Bachelor Superman tied the knot with Lois Lane a few years ago. Yet the wedding of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Girl was a first. The Fantastic Four continued to push the envelope when Susan Richards gave birth to her son Franklin in Fantastic Four number 6. Family ties are crucial to the Fantastic Four. In the first issue, a complicated web of relationship was already sketched out. Susan, the Invisible Girl, is the older sister, surrogate mother for teenager Johnny, the Human Torch. Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, is engaged to Susan and also serves as a father figure to Johnny, and Ben Grimm, the Thing, are almost like Reed and Ben Grimm are almost like brothers. Their often bumpy friendships stretches back to their roommate days in college to add a tasty dash of soap opera spice. Ben is a failed suitor for Susan's hand and represents her affections for Reed. So, so after the cosmic radiation gives them superpowers, the four friends set up housekeeping together in the Baxter building, where they divide their time between fighting cosmic menaces, squabbling with each other. Along the way, they wrestle with the common stuff of family life: paying the rent, transportation, jealousy, sharing chores, defining individual roles, hurt feelings, and finding reliable childcare. What Stanley created was not so much a superhero team as a complicated family whose members just happen to have special abilities. And that will be it to the next section. The Motley Crue. So, soon we will have part 2 of Fantastic Four, The Ties That Bind.